Hello, friends. Today I am joined by Greta Eskridge, who is a second generation homeschooling mom to four and wife of 26 years to Aaron. She is passionate about creating connection, preserving childhood, and chasing adventure. Along with loving nature, books, and coffee, Greta is the host of the popular Greta Eskridge podcast, the author of Adventuring Together and 100 Days of Adventure, and she travels the country as a speaker, encouraging families to create connection in a disconnected world. She lives in sunny Southern California with her artist husband, Aaron, and their four kids, one young adult and three teens. Greta, I am delighted to chat with you here today. And before we get into the main topic of our conversation, I would love it if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, your family, and your background with homeschooling.
Well, thanks for having me, Amy. It's so fun to be here and just get to talk about stuff that matters. Like you said, I'm a second generation homeschooler. So my parents homeschooled my brother and I in the 80s and very early 90s. And they were pioneers. Hardly anybody was homeschooling. When we started, we knew one other homeschooling family in our whole town. And by the end of the journey, when I was a teenager, like we would gather with all the homeschool families in San Diego County, which is where I grew up, there is a lot of people there. And I think there were maybe like 100 families. So it was, it was a small group, but I loved it and decided to homeschool when I had kids. In between, I was a high school English teacher at public high school. It was my first time in public school, and it was an adventure. I have so many great stories. I really loved it. And I think I would have kept doing it except for the fact that I wanted to homeschool when we had our own kids. And so as soon as I was pregnant with our first, our son, our oldest son, um, I retired from teaching at the, young age of like 27 or something. And started homeschooling because, you homeschool from day one. And I've been doing it ever since. And I love it. And I also get to write and to speak about homeschooling and a myriad of other topics. And I just love spending time with my family. Being outside is my favorite, especially tide pools. We still live in San Diego County, so going to the beach, going tide pooling, hiking. Um, yeah, those are the things that bring me joy and lots of coffee. Right now, a lot of coffee because I'm launching a book. So I'm super tired and I'm drinking a lot of coffee.
Mhm. Well, it's hard to have too much coffee. I guess you can. You got to hydrate alongside, right? Keep
Yes,
the heart
that is
rate at a
true.
manageable level. But yeah. Oh, one of the things that I'm really excited that you've been sharing about, you mentioned your new book launching, is have just written and published. I guess by the time this goes live, it will be published officially. It's time to talk to your kids about porn. That's the title of your new book. So I would love to hear why you decided to write this book, how your personal story impacts your perspective on pornography, and why this is a topic we shouldn't be ignoring as parents, even when maybe it feels really uncomfortable.
Ooh, those are great questions. Let's get started. Well, my personal story with pornography is that I was not exposed as a child or even as a teen. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, like pornography was something you had to work hard to find. And, it wasn't on a phone in your pocket or next to your bed all the time, right? I don't recommend phones next to the bed, but let's be real, it often is. um, pornography was not accessible all the time the way it is now. And so I was really fortunate that it was not something that I experienced as a kid or a teenager or even a young adult. It was once I was married and had been married for quite a while, and my husband confessed to having a porn addiction. And it was shocking, absolutely shocking. He did not fit the category of what I thought a person who used pornography was like. I mean, he was a loving dad. He was, a stable. He worked hard for our family. He was a good husband. He still loved Jesus, and I couldn't understand it. But that catapulted me onto the journey of beginning to learn more about pornography and the impact it has on a person who uses it, especially a person who's dealing with addiction, because I wanted to help my husband heal. I wanted to help me heal because I was suffering the impacts of pornography myself, not as a user, but as a person on the, on the side of being impacted by the user. And so I began to learn a lot more. And I wanted to protect our kids. Like we both did. Aaron entered into recovery, and both of us wanted to give our kids better tools than we were given because we were given no tools really. And that is not our parents' fault. They had no tools because nobody talked about pornography, hence the name of my book. Like it's time we have to talk about it because for so long, no one has talked about it. So many people have suffered. So many people are still suffering, especially kids. And what I found was when I started to learn about pornography and share with my friends, at first they were like, this is awkward. Why do you keep talking about this? But also, like, people were responding. They did want to know more because they felt like they needed tools, and there weren't a lot of tools out there. And so eventually, with a lot of time and healing and learning and growing, it's turned into a book. And I'm really excited. I never would have chosen this topic. I wish it wasn't my topic. But because this is the way the story played out for me, and the prayer that I prayed from the very beginning was, God, will you use our story for good? He has. And this book is a testament to that.
I think it's such an important book, and I got to read a pre-release copy and highly recommend it to many families. I am incredibly grateful. My parents were also homeschooling in the 80s and 90s, and I talked to other second-generation homeschoolers, and many have similar experiences to what you described, like these were just not topics that were addressed in their family, things like that. I'm very thankful that I just assumed it was normal that every family just openly discussed these topics like mine did growing up, or, child protection issues. And, um, and it's not common, I think, even now, because parents can just know it's maybe important, but just feel like, I know my parents didn't talk to me about it. I don't even know where to start. Like, what would I even say to my kids? And so just sort of making not only helping parents understand why it's important, but also giving them those tools to like, okay, let's just all be awkward together. And that's what I'll tell my kids sometimes when we're talking about some of these things. I'm like, look, this is still awkward for mom to talk to you about, and we're just all going to be awkward together because it's important.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is that we do have to be brave and we do have to be bold because like uh, honestly, like we're at war for our kids, their hearts, their minds, their physical safety, because pornography is going after customers and they want your kid to be their customer. And so we do have to be bold. We do have to say, this is uncomfortable, or maybe it's scary, or maybe it's painful. Pornography brings up a lot of really difficult emotions and in all of us and it spans the spectrum of what it could be that we're feeling, and that can keep us from wanting to talk to our kids, but we have to get past it for their sake. And it ends up not being as difficult as we think. It can be scary, and we can say, the kind of the wrong thing, and we can feel awkward. But what I have found is the more we do it, the more we talk, the more we create this open, safe culture in our homes, that it becomes, I don't know what it's like in your family, but in my family, sometimes I'm like, okay, we are too comfortable. Like we can talk about anything. And especially when people come from other families, like my son's girlfriends, and I'm like, oh, sorry, guys, we are really comfortable talking about all the things in our family, and it could be awkward for other people. But I'm so glad we've created that culture. It didn't start that way. The beginning, I felt nervous and uncomfortable and scared, but man, with repeated effort and courage and just a determination to do things different, it does get easier.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I can imagine though, maybe there's a parent listening and they're thinking like, but I homeschool, right? Like that would never happen to my kids because I'm, keeping them from technology and they don't have a cell phone too young and we're reading all the right books and, everything's going to be okay, right? So
Yeah.
I know it's not. But why is that a false place to put our hope that somehow we've sheltered our children and kept them in a safe bubble?
That is so fantastic for you to bring up because I remember feeling that exact same way. And when our kids are young, especially as homeschool parents, there is an element of protection we can offer them that is less available if they're, in a classroom in second grade working on their own Chromebook, right? Or riding the school bus next to kids who have their own phones and are unmonitored on that school bus. But that doesn't mean our kid couldn't be exposed anywhere, even in our own home. And it might be when they're a little older. It might not be the average age of exposure is 11, but a lot of experts say it's as young as 8. So it might not be when they're 8, 10, 11 years old. It could be in high school. It could be after high school. Like, praise God if you could give your kids the benefit of an entire childhood free from porn exposure. But what happens after? What happens if you have not talked to them and prepared them for porn exposure after 18? So we have to deal with it, whether it's going to happen when they're younger or older. As homeschooling parents, we still have to face it. Because the reality is, it could happen when they're playing a video game. It could happen while they're like doing research for a project for your homeschool online. It could happen at church. It could happen with fellow homeschoolers while you're at, a field trip or a play date, because not everybody else has the same boundaries in place that you have for safe tech use. So as homeschoolers, we can't think that homeschooling provides this magical like force field to bounce porn off of it and to keep our kids safe. We have to accept the reality is not if our kids get exposed, but when. And again, that could be when your kid is even out of high school, but that doesn't mean you don't prepare them long before then.
And pornography is in so many ways just a normalized part of our culture now. And so someone might wonder, like, is this really such a big deal? Does this topic even really matter? Are we making a big deal about nothing? Because it seems like everybody is just sort of accepting that this is a normal part of development or a normal part of life now. So, what are the consequences of a hypersexualized, objectifying worldview?
Um, I'm so glad you said objectifying because I think that that is one of the biggest issues with pornography is it changes with pornography use. It changes the way you view other people because pornography is about objectification. And what objectification is it's turning a human being into an object, into something that you use and for your own personal gain and then cast aside when you're done. And yes, even if it is an image on the screen, it is still a person. That actually is still a person, a real live, living, breathing human being who's made in the image of God. And when you use them for your own satisfaction and it causes you not to see them, not to respect them, to honor them as a person made in God's image. And then what begins to happen is that filters into not just the way we view that person on the screen, but how we view all of humanity. So it can impact relationships in your marriage, with your family, with your children, with friends, even with strangers, because you begin to view people as victims, people you can use for, whatever personal gain is instead of as human beings, people who are creative, who are humorous, who have something more to offer than just their sexual body parts and your satisfaction. So it changes the way we view other people, and it changes even the way we view ourselves. Again, made in God's image, designed for a purpose. And that to me is one of the greatest damages pornography does to the person who's using it. And that's just one of the things. But I think, gosh, we want to give our kids the opportunity to learn to see everyone as people who God made, and that they are worthy, like I said, of respect and honor. And so we want to pour that into them, and pornography does the absolute opposite.
I liked that you brought up that it even changes the way we view ourselves, right? Because someone could say, well, I mean, it's not hurting anyone, right? Like, who is this really hurting? It's a victimless crime. But it's not, because it's impacting the way we view ourselves. It's
Yeah.
impacting the way we think about who we are and other
Wow.
image bearers, right? Like, it's impacting like literally our brain. Our brain
Yes.
chemistry, not only our soul, but our physical body too, because we're both. And so it's doing damage to the one
Yes.
who is experiencing, um, using pornography as well. And so it's not, what could go wrong?
Right. Just this morning, my husband and I were talking about the way pornography use causes anxiety and depression, um, stress in the person who's using it, because what they're engaging in, even though it's on a screen, what they're filling their brain with is trauma. Because and so much more so now than ever before, because so much of pornography is violent. And so the person who's engaging with pornography is consuming trauma that has a huge impact on their like on every part of them, especially their soul, their spirit, their mental health. Um, and so we find a person who's using pornography, whether they're using it regularly or just occasionally, it has an impact. Their mental health suffers. There is increased anxiety, depression, self hatred, and those are not things that we want our kids to deal with. We don't want anyone to deal with it, of course, but especially when we're talking about children, like that should not be their experience when they're learning about sexuality and about the way sex looks. Like that should not be what they're experiencing. It shouldn't be something that is stressful and traumatic. And so we have to address that aspect of it as well.
Yeah. Well, so now we're convinced, okay? This is important. We need to talk to our kids about. And then it's like, oh, okay. So what do I say? How do I do this? Can you give some tips or maybe even examples of ways to initiate conversations on this topic with children at different stages of development?
Yes. This is one of my favorite parts, because I think like I want to be practical, and I want parents to feel equipped so they can equip their kids. And one of my favorite parts of the book is that there are actual scripts in the book, so parents they can read the words. They don't even have to try to come up with it on their own. But what you'll be really surprised by is how quick the conversations can be. Uh, um, so for example, if you're talking to your elementary school student, 6, 7, 8 years old, and it's your initial conversation, it could be as simple as this. Hey, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something called pornography. Pornography is bad for your body, your brain, and your heart. It's my job to keep you safe from all the things that could hurt you. And so I need to tell you what pornography is and what to do if you see it. Pornography is pictures or movies of people who have no clothes on. We could see their privates, and we know we don't show other people our privates. We don't look at theirs. And if you ever see pictures or movies like that on a screen, maybe while you're playing a video game on your tablet, or you're looking on my phone, or you're doing stuff on the computer, or if someone shows you on their phone or their computer, maybe somebody's older brother or even your friend, even a grown up, what I want you to do if you see pornography, if you see those kinds of pictures or movies, you can turn the tablet off, turn the phone over, shut the computer, or if someone shows you, you can say, I don't want to look at that. And you walk away. You walk away from the phone, the computer, the person. You come find me or dad or another grown up that you trust, and you say, I think I just saw pornography. Can you help me? And we will. We want to keep you safe. You will not be in trouble. We will not be mad at you. We want to keep you safe from things that could hurt you. So, do you have any questions? And they might not have a single question because to them, you've just told them about something that they need to be aware of. And it's no different than if you had said, don't touch the stove because it's hot. Don't cross the street without me. It's just another thing you need to keep them safe from. So the conversation is short. I always say you give them the least amount of details to keep them the most safe. They don't need details. They don't need to know the ins and outs of pornography. They just need to know what it is, what to do if they see it. And they just need that plan. So that's for the younger kids. Um, if you're going to talk to, say, your teenager, because parents will be like, well, I can't talk to my teenager. Like they already know what it is. Maybe they've seen it. It's too late. I should have done it sooner. And I think that's the exact tactic we need to take with our older kids. Because even homeschool kids, if they're an older teen and they've spent time just out in the world, there's a great chance they've heard about pornography. There's even a chance they've seen it at that age. And so we can be really honest with them. And in the same way, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something called pornography. And you might tell from their body language at that point that they're like, oh, like, whoa, mom, it's uncomfortable. Why are you saying this? They might just turn a little pale. They might not know what you're talking about, but you can then just carry on with maybe it's something you've heard of. Maybe you know someone who has seen pornography. Maybe you have, or maybe this is brand new, but I need to talk to you about it because I shouldn't have waited so long. We should have talked about it a while ago, and I'm sorry, but I want to talk about it now because it's something that is dangerous and bad for you, and I want to keep you safe from it. And then you tell them the exact same thing you said to the little kids. You tell them what it is, even if they know, just they need to hear from you, not from what Google says, not from what they've heard from friends or people at youth group or whatever. They need to hear from you. Tell them what it is. Tell them what to do if they see it. They need an escape plan. And then be sure to say, if you have seen pornography already, or you know somebody who has, and you have questions, if you feel curious, if you feel bad, you can tell me. I am on your team. I love you. I want to support you.
I think that's so beautiful and such a good encouragement because one of the things you talked about with both the younger ones and the older ones is you're coming from this place. They know it's because you love them and you want to keep them safe. And not like, I don't want you to do this bad thing, right? It's not that. It's I love you. I want to keep you safe. And to have that kind of attitude, even as we talk to our kids about many topics. Like one of the things I've told them is like, if you're researching something or you accidentally stumble on something, that's not your fault and you're not in trouble. Like, please come tell me because if tricky people, sneaky, evil people try to come into my living room and hurt you, then they're the ones who are the problem, not you. And so, just helping them know that like you're a safe place to talk so that they don't then think they have to hide or like, oh, I can't tell mom. Like she'd be so ashamed of me. She'd be so upset with me, right? But that we have that. If we've had the conversation, hopefully they'll know okay, mom knows about this, right? I can talk to her about that.
Amy, that is so good. I love that. What you've empowered your kids with that conversation and what you said about tricky people coming into your house, and your job is to keep your kids safe from that. Like, that's such a powerful image for them. Yeah, I love that. Well done, Mom.
Well, thank you to my parents who set good, gave good examples for me growing up too.
That's
As we
amazing.
start learning more, or maybe as parents reflect on their own possibly painful experiences, it can start to be really scary. We start realizing how easy it is for our children, our spouses, ourselves to be exposed to pornography or to become enslaved to it. So, how can we parent well without succumbing to the fear, right? Parent from a place of hope, communicate clearly without also not having our children be totally terrified and freaked out either. I guess it's kind of one of those tricky parenting things that happens on a lot of topics, but especially ones that feel so weighty.
Yeah, I think so much of our like posture as we talk about it with our kids matters. And I know that especially at the beginning, I failed on this because I was walking through my own trauma, my own hurt, my own grief, and my own fear. And it was hard for me, especially in the beginning, to talk about pornography without those things coming through. I tried as hard as I could, but I know sometimes I did not do it well. Um, but with time, um, I have and continuing to talk about it, I have gotten better at just having this posture of, not a tense body, not a face that looks and feels pinched and stressed. Um, but to be really just relaxed as possible and to engage in organic moments as they come up. So, an example of that would be one time we were driving, we pulled up to a stoplight. The car that pulls up next to us is completely covered in anime stickers, which are sometimes highly sexualized, like cartoon style drawings. And that's what was this car was covered in. And rather than ignore it, because we all knew it was there, we all saw it. Became visibly uncomfortable, like palpably uncomfortable and visibly in our car. Rather than ignore it, to just say something and to ask my kids, why do you think that guy in that car thinks it's okay for him to cover his car with those stickers and expose all of us to things that we don't want to be exposed to? Um, do you think anybody ever talked to him about objectifying women and why that's not good for him or for others or for us? And so changing the tone of the conversation, instead of it being about judgment and fear and anger, communicating that I have concern and care for people who are being hurt by pornography. Even a person who covers his car in stickers, we don't know his story. Maybe nobody ever told him that he shouldn't objectify women. Can we have compassion for him? Can we have grace for him? And when we begin to approach the conversation in that way, then my kids, I pray, will know that I will have compassion and grace for them. Um, and that has been a really helpful tool in our family for how I can parent, not from a place of fear, but from hope, that even if my kids are exposed to pornography, that even if they use pornography, there is still compassion, there is still grace, and there is hope for redemption and restoration. And I know that's true because it happened in my own marriage. So I have a whole chapter about this in the book because it is a big deal. And it is possible. It takes work, but thank goodness we have God on our side to help us.
Yeah. Well, how can we respond with grace and love to a child who we realize has been exposed to pornography?
Um, again, that whole posture. Um, how can we pray in advance that our posture would be one of compassion and grace? Because I think that is the key. Like, begin to pray even now, long before your kids ever come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I've seen pornography. Pray that God would give you peace in that moment and that you would not give in to all those emotions that are surely going to be swirling around in your heart. fear, anxiety, disappointment, anger, all of those emotions are real and valid. But if you can set those aside for the moment and approach your kid and say something as simple as, I am so sorry that you saw that. Um, I want to help you and I want to help you heal and to be able to hug them, touch them in the moment, not jump right to the punishment or how you're going to change technology. Give me your phone right now. That should not be the first response. Those will come later. You're going to need to talk about what they saw so that you can help them recover from that. You're going to have to talk about how to change safety around tech in your house. Those are conversations that have to happen, but they shouldn't be first. The first thing should be, I'm so sorry that you saw that. You must be hurting right now. Or maybe you're feeling confused or scared. Maybe you're even feeling ashamed. You don't have to feel any of those things. I'm here. I love you. We're going to help you.
Well, maybe a parent who is listening is secretly addicted to pornography, or their spouse, or a child, a teen. What hopeful words would you give to them? And then what practical resources might you suggest?
Mm. Um, there's a quote from a woman named Elizabeth Elliot, and she's a woman who walked through a tremendous amount of grief and struggle in her life. And one of the things she says is, she says, of one thing I am sure, God's story never ends in ashes. And um, that quote just makes me so emotional because sometimes it feels like you're just deep in ashes, right? And my encouragement is um, God will get you through, and you might be in ashes for a while, but that is not where the story ends. And you can't control what the story is for other people. So if the story is someone else's addiction, you might not be able to help them affect the change that they need to. But that doesn't mean your personal story ends in ashes because God is there to still work in your heart and your life. And if you are the one who's struggling with addiction yourself, there is hope, there is healing. There are so many people out there who can provide help. My husband meets weekly with other men who are walking through what he walked through, and he shows up for them daily with calls and accountability, and it's miraculous. And there are people like that who want to help. I will give you, Amy, some a couple places for resources, whether it's for the person who's struggling with porn use in their own life, a betrayed spouse, so you're walking through somebody else's porn use, or help for kids who are using pornography, and you can put them in the show notes because I want people to have access. So many times it's just like, I don't even know what to look for.
Yeah.
But there is help out there, and your story does not have to end in ashes.
I will definitely have those links in the show notes, as well as a link to your new book. I really encourage parents to read this. I think it would be valuable for parents no matter what age your kid is. If you don't even have children yet and you're thinking through what kind of parent do I want to be, or how can I help and support the families around me? Or if you're like, oh no, my kids are teens and grown and I don't think I ever had this conversation with them, the book would be for you too, and anything in between. So definitely check out the show notes to grab your copy. But here at the end, we will, okay, transition from a very weighty, important topic. Take a pause, but we're going to transition to the
Yeah.
questions to the questions I like to ask all of my guests. And so the first is just, Greta, what are you personally reading lately?
Okay, I gotta think. I always have so many books going on, right? At the same time. So I'm reading a physical copy of the book. I'm looking. It's called I think it's called We Were the Lucky Ones. It's a story based on a true story, takes place in World War II, a Jewish family in Poland, and their story of journeying through the Holocaust. I absolutely love anything about World War II. So I'm reading that, and then I'm listening to all the Chronicles of Narnia books. Um, so I loved listening to books while I do chores and walk and drive. And those books are like just absolute comfort for my soul. So like usually like once a year I re-listen to the whole series because they just bring me a lot of joy. And then I'm also reading a new book on the topic of mental health and sexual addiction. So yeah, just all over the place.
I think there is probably always at least two people in my family reading or listening to Chronicles of Narnia at any given time. It's sort of like you read the series, then you just start it over again. You can never read it too many times.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the final question is, what would be your best tip for turning around a homeschool day that seems to be going completely off the rails?
Go outside. Just go be outside, even if it's in your backyard, spread a blanket, have your snack out there and read your book, read a book aloud outside or pile in the car, go to some beautiful nature spot and do the same thing, or don't even read a book and just walk and be together and experience the like restorative power of God's creation. That's my number one.
We are finally getting hints of spring here in North Carolina. We had snow last week, but the good thing about North Carolina snow is you enjoy it for like 2 days and then it goes away. And now we're like 76 today. So we've just been soaking up all of the sunshine.
I forget sometimes because I live in Southern California that it's February. Is it still February? Yes, it is. And well, when we're recording, it'll
Yeah.
be March when you guys hear this, but still that's not spring for everyone. But for us, it's like 75 and sunny. And so I'm like, oh, not everybody can just go outside and spread a blanket on the snow.
Yes, I guess some of
Oh,
us might have to bundle up first, depending on where you
yes.
live.
And have hot chocolate outside, but still go outside. That's my number one tip.
Greta, where can people find you all around the internet?
I'm most active on Instagram, so you can find me there. My handle is Ma and Pa Modern, but you could also just look up Greta Eskridge and I'll pop right up. You can also find me on my website, gretaeskridge.com, and my podcast, the Greta Eskridge podcast, wherever you love podcast listening. I'll be there. So those are my places.
Fabulous. And I will have links to those things and the show notes for this episode over at humilityanddoxology.com. Thank you so much for taking the time, Greta, to be here and to speak with us today, and to anyone who is listening or watching. This is such a valuable and important topic. I'm glad you were here. Please take a time to send this episode to a friend that you think could use this encouragement. And until next time, happy homeschooling.